Hey buddy, I've been thinking a lot lately, and I want to take us on a little drive. I'm thinking about how most men are out of touch with who they are. And essentially, what is authenticity? It's being unapologetically yourself. But a lot of us don't really know ourselves. A lot of us men are trapped in this mentality of validating our existence, proving that we somehow matter. I've spent a majority of my life caught up in this, and it took several years to break free from the internal matrix inside of my mind. It's like, yes, there is an external matrix, following the crowd, being like everybody else. But usually the biggest war is within, not without. And it took me a long time to learn this, because you start to wonder, why can't I keep the promises to myself, to other people? I'm addicted to all these vices. I'm drinking alcohol, I'm vaping, I'm overweight. And no matter how many good intentions I have, I can't seem to break these behaviors. The reason for that, and I know I harp on this quite a bit, is inner healing needs to be done. Your inner child is very programmed, and it colors everything that you do. You've got inner trauma that hasn't been healed. You have these unconscious thought patterns and these unconscious behaviors, and you essentially just become a slave to them. And breaking these patterns and habits and behaviors can't be done through sheer will. And it can to an extent, but here's the caveat. Say you're addicted to pornography, and you somehow break the habit. Awesome. You quit pornography. A few months have gone by. What you will notice happening is another vice will more than likely pop up in its place. All of a sudden, you're like, yeah, I don't view pornography anymore. I'm free from PMO, but now I'm playing 7 hours of video games a day. Now I'm overeating. Now I'm binge watching Netflix. What happened was, the vice that you had that emerged from a wound, lack of approval, not feeling loved, feelings of abandonment, whatever it might be for you, it created this vice. And then you broke free of that vice. But the root of the problem wasn't fixed. You really don't become free in this life until you've healed. And you don't even really have free will, because you're operating from conditioning and patterns that are unconscious. So as Carl Jung says, the work is to make the unconscious conscious. This inner healing doesn't happen on its own. Time does not heal all wounds. That's why you got 60-year-old men who are miserable. They're still dealing with inner child wounds that they never faced. And there are many ways to face these things. I'll get into that in a minute, but another aspect of healing the inner child, the reason why it's so important, is because your imagination, stick with me for a minute. Your imagination is everything. I've got a 4-year-old son. I see the way he looks around, the way he sees the world. He's got this awe, this wonder. And unless he is in physical pain or triggered by something, his default state is just curiosity. He's got this innocence, this wonder. And his imagination is unbelievable. The way that he sees the world. And what happens is, there's this natural progression. You're a child, you have innocence, your ego hasn't really fully developed yet. And then what happens? Your ego comes into place. I'm so-and-so. This is my toy. I'm strong. I'm better than so-and-so. My dad can beat up your dad. However that looks like as the ego develops. And this is an important part of development. You need the ego. The ego is also what brings suffering into your life. And this is also very necessary. Because through suffering, it's how we gain wisdom. You don't really gain real wisdom in this life until you suffer and you overcome that suffering. Another quote by Carl Jung, he says, the first part of our life is developing a healthy ego. He says the first half of our life is developing a healthy ego. And then the second half of our lives is learning how to let it go. And most men, they never get to that stage. They get into their ego, maybe they learn some things, they have some wisdom, gain some competency. But the next stage is figuring out how to get back to innocence. Because when you take innocence and you pair it up with wisdom, that's when you really start to impact the world. That's when you start to help other people heal. And so, a lot of sages, like modern day sages, like ascended spiritual masters, you'll notice they're just very present. They're very loving. They seem very light. But they also have a shit ton of wisdom. And that's a powerful combination. And that's your birthright, to eventually get to that place of both wisdom and the choosing to get back to innocence. And it's not naivety when you have both wisdom and innocence. So to get back to that innocence, that's where healing the inner child comes into play. And it takes intention, it takes a degree of devotion and discipline, and you have to really want it. You have to really want that. You have to get tired of your suffering to a degree. And so, there's a few different ways to do this, and it can be a process. It's almost like me in one video trying to describe to you how to get ripped, how to get jacked. It's like there's so many different phases. You gotta bulk a little bit, you gotta lean bulk, then you gotta cut, then you gotta push your strength, you gotta dial in your nutrition. And with inner healing, there's a few different paths, For some people, meditation is the ticket, journaling is the ticket. There's something called parts work, internal family systems it's called. And what that is essentially is we all have various autonomous personalities living within our subconscious that we're unaware of. And you can start to make that conscious. And that's what shadow work is. That's what Carl Jung coined, shadow work. So, the point of this video, men just need more awareness. We get really caught in our dense ego. And I think men specifically have a tough time looking at these things because we don't want to tap into the feminine side that feels deeply. We want to just always have the front of strength, even if you're just a little kid on the inside. You might think you want to sleep with a ton of women. Brother, what you really want is to be loved and to be seen on the deepest level. For someone to look at you and all your imperfections and still look at you and say, hey, I love you, you're worthy of love, I see you, I accept you, the good and the bad. And the caveat is that you can become that person for yourself. And that's one of the most powerful things you can do, because then you start to attract the external love that is equivalent to the love that you have learned how to give yourself. And I know this can seem daunting, but I'm just here to tell you, man, that it is possible. No matter what level of deep suffering that you may be going through. I've been through a lot of ups and downs in my life. I've had failed relationships. I've had my father commit suicide when I was younger. I've been through a divorce. I've lost various identities that I really held on to. And I've reached this place of just freedom. And you can do the same. You just have to commit yourself to it. Start seeking. Become a seeker. Seek and you will find. There's a profound truth in that. It's very true. Another amazing thing is when you do tap into your imagination and your childhood innocence again. For the first time, many men finally give themselves permission to create the life for themselves that they truly want. And when I say what they truly want, I mean what their higher self, their heart really wants. You might think that you want just wealth and women and things like that, but a lot of those desires, I'm telling you right now, you've been conditioned to want those things based on the content that you consume and based on the world around you that has constantly been feeding you certain narratives. But when you strip all of that shit away and you heal, you start to think back when you were an innocent kid. Like, what did you used to love? What did you used to enjoy? It's like, oh, I used to love music. I used to love creativity. And there's things start to come back to you. You know, you find yourself wanting to create. You find yourself wanting to dive into those things that your ego stopped giving you permission to do because of fear. Because of fear of not being enough, fear of not being validated, that masculine urge to build something that the world can look at and be like, yeah, that guy, he accomplished something. Even if it goes against your heart, even if it goes against your higher nature. So, not all of you are going to be able to receive this, but I know there's going to be a handful of you that really resonate with this message and who are fucking exhausted about trying to follow a certain narrative, to try to be somebody, a version of you that isn't even real. Write the book. Create the song. Build the business. Whatever it is that's calling out to you. I know that you can do it. So, yeah, seeking you will find. For me, there was even a path of plant medicine. The next video I make, I'm actually going to talk more in depth about plant medicine, because I do, every time I mention that, I look at the comments and there's a host of questions where people are like, what do you mean by plant medicine? I'll go more in depth on that. So that way it's not just this cryptic thing. I'll unpack that for you and just kind of share that path, because for me, like, that was a necessary element that I needed. It kind of just unlocked a part of reality that I was missing, and it deepened my understanding of who I am, spirituality, and it gave me permission to get back into my heart But that's not the only way to do it, you know? Deep meditation, sometimes even fasting. If you're new to spirituality, I know these things can seem very foreign to you, but spirituality oftentimes unlocks the parts of you that haven't been giving you permission to step into the reality of who you truly are and what you're actually meant to accomplish in this life. And sometimes with that comes wealth, comes attraction to women, comes the outer trappings of this world, but it no longer becomes about that. And even if you lose those things, you're still at peace. So, if you enjoy talking about these types of things, I want you to consider joining the Conscious Men community. Link in description. These are the types of things that we talk about. We go pretty deep. We've got weekly Zoom calls. And we get into it, man. And it's a whole group of guys with open hearts, open minds, who are sick of the typical way that society operates. And for some guys in there, for the first time, they're feeling very seen, that they can talk about these things and work on their self-improvement journey and not feel like they're the only one. So, if that interests you, link in description. I think that's really all I got for you tonight. I come across people every single day and they just seem lost. You know, they've got this lost look in their eyes, and I understand. I've got a heart for those people because I've been that guy. And another thing is, once you kind of get to the other side of that healing, your presence changes everywhere you go without even realizing it sometimes. You bring a lightness and a presence into the room. And people are drawn to that because there's a lot of hurting people in this world. They don't know who they are. They're unhealed, they're wounded. And sometimes you walk into a store and you look the clerk in the eye and you actually see them, and that 10 seconds gives them a bit of relief. You become the source of peace in some people's entire day just by being your healed, authentic self. And I think that's the purpose of humanity. Very few people are tapping into this side of themselves, and it really is possible. Seek and you will find. Take just the steps. That's all I got for you tonight. Just pulled into Chipotle. You are loved. You matter. And you've barely scratched the surface of what you're capable of. I'll talk to you soon.
Whoa.